All right. This is our policy review committee meeting for today. And you received a copy of the minutes, I believe, from the meeting of March the 2nd. That's when we last met. If you had a chance to review those, and if you have, are there any corrections or additions that need to be made to those minutes of March 2nd?
I don't see any changes or modifications.
I didn't find any.
All right, well, if there are no changes to those minutes, we're gonna just let them stand approved as they were presented to you. We don't have any unfinished business items for today, but there are several policies that we do want to bring to your attention and ask that you consider. And we're gonna be looking at the policies in the manual that you received. And we're gonna be looking at policies 15 through 28 in the binder. And the first one is policy number 5-5.6. And this is the school board's food and nutrition policy regarding meal accounts. Students are not permitted to charge snacks and beverages. And this proposed revision also includes language that allows the school board to solicit and receive donations for the purpose of eliminating or offsetting school meal debt. And they can use those funds solely for that purpose. You may recall recently there have been organizations that have donated money to schools in order to satisfy outstanding food debts owed by students. And so this revision to school board policy 5-5.6 will allow you to do that as well, to receive monies from community groups to satisfy outstanding debts that students may owe for meals purchased at school. Any questions, comments, concerns about policy 5-5.6?
No.
No, but thank you.
Okay. 5-5.2 is also a policy pertaining to the food and nutrition policy of the school board. This policy brings the policy in line with the current practice of Suffolk Public Schools. Meals are provided free for students eligible to receive free meals under the National School Lunch Program, the National Breakfast Program, and the Summer Food Service Program. So this simply brings your policy in line with what your current practice is. Right now, under the policy, it talks about not only free lunches or free meals, but it also talks about reduced meal costs. And your practice is not to offer reduced meal costs. Your meals are free. And so this brings the policy in line with your current practice. Any comments, concerns about 5-5.2?
No.
Okay.
I have none.
Okay. 5-5.7. This policy includes the definition for excess food and also for fundraisers. And it sets forth the responsibilities of Suffolk Public Schools as it relates to the nutritional profile of food items to determine whether a food item can be sold to students. this is all related to nutrition and good health, and to make sure that students are receiving nutritious food, even those that are sold at school. In addition to that, the superintendent is responsible for establishing procedures by which excess food can be distributed to students enrolled in Suffolk Public Schools who are eligible to receive free meals under the school breakfast program or the National School Lunch Program. And so this is a way of doing two things, one of which is helping the community in a sense by allowing excess food to be provided, and then also protecting the nutrition of students by ensuring that only food items that are of a nutritional value can be sold to students as a means of a fundraiser.
Okay.
Any questions about 5-5.7?
I have a question. Does the nutrition, special nutrition things that Dr. Whiting has been doing at Booker T recently, does this come under here?
I'm not sure, but I believe that it does.
Okay.
Because as you know, they have been distributing food in the community.
Right.
10 days of the week. And that may very well fall under the excess food that they're making use of. All right, 6-1.1. I'm recommending that we actually delete this policy from the policy manual in order to avoid an overlap with 6-2.1, because if you were to look at 6-2.1, you will find some of the same language in that policy that is in 6-1.1. So in order to avoid that overlap, I'm just recommending that we delete 6-1.1 because that language is already included in 6-2.1.
2.1. Okay.
And 6-2.1 pertains to short and long-term planning and the role of the superintendent in the capital improvement program. As you know, local school boards are responsible for erecting and furnishing, equipping, and the maintenance of all school facilities. And so this language was added to this policy in 6-2.1. Also, with regard to the role of the superintendent, the model policy of the VSBA recommends that the school superintendent may make recommendations for new buildings and renovations after receiving input concerning facilities utilization, development, and closure from the community. The VSBA model policy also recommends deleting from the policy language that says a broad-based community representing staff should be included in that process. So basically what will happen here, if this is your recommendation and adopted by the school board, those who would make up the committee that would provide input to the superintendent will be pretty much a broad-based community citizens and not staff members. And so
Okay.
So input will be coming from the community and not from the staff.
Okay. Now, would the community include, you're saying the community, when we say a broad-based committee representing the staff and the community, we're saying that we're deleting the staff or who's involved in the community?
Yeah, right. The VSBA model policy recommends deleting the staff as part of the broad base group of people and only having the community involved in that.
Okay. 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 after receiving input from facilities users. Oh, okay.
And so the superintendent would be making his recommendation for new buildings or renovations after receiving input from the community.
From the community. Okay. Okay. And so what we're suggesting is that when the superintendent makes his recommendation, that would be inclusive of staff opinions? Or would it be, are they suggesting?
Well, I'm pretty sure that,
I'm just asking,
yeah,
I'm just asking, his opinions would be inclusive of any recommendations from staff anyway.
I would think so. I would think so.
Okay.
It's just that in terms of the formal committee that he would
Right.
be,
That would be community.
it would be the community.
I see. I see. Okay.
School board policy 7-3.2, which is your tab 20. This is the school board's equal employment and non-discrimination policy as it relates to hiring, and it expands the number of groups protected from discrimination. And the recommendation or the recommended revision prohibits discrimination in employment on the basis of creed, ancestry, political affiliation, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, pregnancy, childbirth or related medical conditions, veteran status, or genetic information. Language has also been inserted to read that personnel decisions are based on merit and the ability to perform the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodations. Also, that the school board provides facilities, programs, and activities that are accessible, usable, and available to qualified persons with disabilities. Then lastly, the school board does not discriminate against qualified persons with disabilities in the provision of health and welfare and other social services. And then the last part of this revision is the requirement that this policy is to be, 1, posted in prominent areas of each school building, 2, included in employee handbooks, and 3, provided to any employee or candidate for employment upon request. And training to prevent prohibited discrimination is included in employee in-service training. So again, this is the equal employment and non-discrimination policy of the school board as it relates to hiring decisions. Any questions or concerns about the non-discrimination policy in hiring?
No, I don't have.
any.
Your tab 21, which is school board policy 7-4.2. The only change that's being recommended in this policy are the code sections that are referenced. Applicants to drive a school bus must certify they have not been convicted within the preceding 5 years and assigned to any alcohol safety program or driver rehab program pursuant to 18.2-271.1 or required to attend a driver improvement program as outlined in 46.2-498, and must have successfully undertaken the examination to demonstrate that the applicant can successfully operate a school bus as required by 46.2-339. So what we've done here, we just inserted the actual code sections that correspond with that language. Any questions about policy 7-4.2?
No.
I don't have any.
I don't either.
Okay, 7-5.1. This is an interesting policy as it relates to maintaining a drug-free workplace and programs that receive federal grant funds. And of course, Suffolk Public Schools receive federal grant funds. Within 30 days after receiving notice from an employee that the employee has been found guilty of a drug-related offense, the public agency is required to take appropriate action against the employee up to and including termination, or requiring the employee to satisfactorily participate in a drug abuse assistance or rehab program approved by a federal, state, or local health, law enforcement, or other appropriate agency. So this again supports the drug-free workplace. Employee found guilty of a drug-related offense must report that offense, and then the school is required, Suffolk Public Schools will be required to take appropriate action against the employee up to and including termination, or requiring the employee to participate in a drug abuse assistance or rehab program. Any questions about policy 7-5.1?
I don't have any questions.
No. I don't know.
All right, policy 7-9.1, your tab 23. This policy of the school board addresses the filing of complaints against a school employee. Any parent or guardian of a student enrolled in Suffolk Public Schools, or any resident of the city, can file a complaint against an employee of Suffolk Public Schools. The complaint should be filed with the superintendent or the superintendent's designee. If the complaint involves an allegation of child abuse, the complaint must be referred to the Department of Social Services for an investigation. Information determined to be unfounded is not to be maintained in the employee's personnel file, but may be maintained in a separate sealed file if the complaint alleged civil or criminal offenses. When a complaint is received, notice is sent to the person making the complaint, notifying the individual that the complaint has been received and that it is being investigated. There's also a recommended time period of 15 days from the alleged incident in which the complaint must be filed. So this is your 7-9.1, and they are the changes that I just referenced.
So this is changed. This is changed to you said 7 days, 15 days.
Right, it's 15 days.
15 days. Okay.
So 15 days from the alleged incident to file the complaint.
Okay. Okay. No, I don't have any questions.
No question.
Your 7-9.2, recommending deleting this policy because it contains language that is already found in what we just looked at, 7-9.1. And if you notice in the current policy, it says the complaint must be filed within 30 days. We have now shortened that time period to 15 days.
15. Mhm.
And you know, one of the benefits of shortening the time period for filing a complaint is that if you're going to do an investigation of the charge, you want to try to do it while things are still fresh in the minds of people. And of course, the further out it is, information becomes stale, people's memories begin to fade, and it's a little harder to do the investigation.
Absolutely.
So having a 15-day time period in which to file the complaint after the alleged incident makes it more likely that people will remember what took place.
Absolutely. I agree. So we are deleting 7-9.2 completely.
Correct.
Okay.
Seven 13.2. This is your grievance procedure for classified personnel, non-licensed individuals serving in Suffolk Public Schools. And the revision to 7-13.2 will bring your policy in line with your current practice. Your current practice is that disciplinary actions regarding classified employees are heard by the school board. You as a school board conduct those hearings. They are not heard by a hearing officer, nor are they heard by a fact-finding panel. They are heard by you. And so this brings the policy in line with your practice. And you'll also notice on page 2, it even includes the 5 working days for which someone must request a hearing. And I see that there's another reference to the hearing officer that we'll need to take out.
Yeah, see on the last page.
Right.
And so this is under 22.1-311. That's the change to the legal authority.
Yeah, and the actual code provision that gives you the authority to implement your own grievance procedure for classified employees is 22.1-79, subsection 6.
Oh, okay.
Any questions about 7-13?
So are we deleting 22-22.1?
Dash,
So the question, my question is, are we deleting the thing that's underlined?
yes, we're going to
Are
delete.
we, see, I see the 22.1-79. We're deleting this 22.1-311.
Correct. And
Where's the change?
And the 22.1-313. Because the only legal reference that we need to keep is going to be 22.1-79 subsection 6, because that pertains to classified employees. 11 and 13
Okay.
will apply to teachers.
Okay. And then we're marking out the hearing officer.
Correct. And we're going to put
the hearing officer in the last paragraph.
Right. And so it'll be school board.
Okay. Okay.
7-19.1. This proposed revision addresses advertising vacancies and new positions. The reference to positions being advertised on the internet in each school and in the school administrative office is being recommended for removal. And this is being recommended for removal to allow for greater flexibility in advertising positions. And it simply will provide that all vacancies are to be advertised. So where they're advertised, how they're advertised is no longer limited. By having the language in here that said it had to be advertised on the internet or in school or at the administrative office, pretty much limited to advertising in those locations. So just to say that be advertised. And then also that applications for employment must be made in writing and on forms provided by HR.
Okay.
Okay. School Board Policy 7-20.2. This would require applicants for employment to certify that they have not been convicted of any violent felony set forth in the definition of a barrier crime. And by the way, we looked at this the last time we met. And at that time, we looked at the policy as it relates to people wanting to contract with Suffolk Public Schools, and they could not be found guilty of a barrier crime. This now applies to people that are seeking employment with Suffolk Public Schools. They must certify that they have not been convicted of a violent felony set forth in the definition of a barrier crime. And you may recall that there are like a total of 160 barrier offenses or barrier crimes. And they are the most serious of felonies. They're things like stalking and sexual battery, crimes against nature, child pornography, and so forth. The policy also indicates that those who have been convicted of barrier crimes, that they are not suitable for hire. Also, the board may employ individuals not convicted of a barrier crime and does not involve sexual molestation, physical or sexual abuse or rape of a child, but convicted of a felony and the individual's rights have been restored by the governor. So this will enable schools to hire someone convicted of a felony, but the felony was not a barrier crime. It was not one that involved sexual molestation, physical and sexual abuse, or rape of a child. And the person's civil rights, they've been restored by the governor. So if a person can satisfy those, even though they've been convicted of a felony, they can still be hired.
Okay. All right.
School Board Policy 7-23.1 removes the language that if a probationary teacher's evaluation is not satisfactory, the school board cannot re-employ the teacher. And so what this means is that the school board could exercise its option to re-employ a probationary teacher with an unsatisfactory evaluation. And Virginia Code section 22.1-303 provides that the division superintendent shall consider such evaluations in making any recommendations regarding non-renewal. But notice it says that the school superintendent shall consider such evaluations, but then it also says among other things. So even though a teacher could have an unsatisfactory evaluation, if the school superintendent, considering other things, believes that the teacher should be given a contract for the new school year, that teacher can still be offered a new contract.
Okay.
And I would imagine this change was done in part to address the teacher shortage issue. That, you know, there may be a teacher in a classroom that may have some problem areas, but yet there are areas that can be improved upon. And so want to give that teacher more opportunities to improve and remain in the classroom.
Mr. Waller.
Yes.
Mr. Waller.
Mm-hmm.
Waller. I would think also that when we moved to, you know, we moved to that 7-point model of that 7 standard model. And I think the 7 standard model, the model that we have for evaluation, may be getting us into some trouble, because I think that the weight that we put on testing may be coming back to haunt us. Some educators warned about that when we went into that hole, and it may indeed be coming back. Many teachers got students who were indeed going to test well no matter what. Many teachers got students who started from way down and they moved them up, but maybe not up as far as progress as people thought they should go, or as the expectation might have been. And their evaluation might not have been where it should have. And I think that we're beginning to look at that, because I think a lot of things are beginning to come back to haunt us in some of the structures that we set in place. Mm. And I think that there's some research to show that just looking at a strict model of this is the way it ought to be and we can project this, may be coming back to haunt us. That's just my opinion. But from looking at some of the research of this is the way it's got to be and this is how it's going to fall out, it may indeed be coming back. So I'm glad that somebody is looking at that.
Good, good. You know, and you're probably right about that. Because of the correlation between test scores and evaluations. And so if students test poorly, all of a sudden the teacher gets an unsatisfactory evaluation. And if that was a probationary teacher, under the former law, that probationary teacher could not be hired in a subsequent year.
Right.
That poor evaluation.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Waller, this also provides that the superintendent allowed the person that's in probationary status to receive extra training. That's also included in here, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, again, I think it's a good way to keep a teacher that has demonstrated the ability to perform, but may still have some areas where they're a weak in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to keep that teacher on board and give that teacher an opportunity to improve.
I think so as well. And I think it gives the in-school administrator, I think it gives in high school, it gives the department chair, it gives the in-school administrator, the principal, and those persons who are there an opportunity to make a recommendation to the principal, because they've seen the day-to-day functioning of the individual, and an opportunity to give input that may not necessarily be collected on the evaluation instrument. They may see something indeed that may not be able to be picked with the instrument, and may need to be considered. So it allows some options that may not necessarily be there. But I'm glad that that's available.
And that's a good point. That's a real good point. because there are things that may not show up on the evaluation instrument itself.
Absolutely.
That would certainly be important as to whether or not that person should be retained.
Retain. Mhm.
There's one last policy that I'm going to provide to you today, and this is in reference to the School Safety Audit Committee. And this was brought to my attention in part by Dr. Rice. And the proposed policy revision aligns the duties of the School Safety Audit Committee with Virginia Code Section 22.1-279.8, which requires the School Safety Audit Committee to do several things. One is to identify and develop solutions for physical safety concerns. And two, identify and evaluate patterns of student safety concerns occurring on school property or at school-sponsored events. And the solutions and the responses shall include recommendations for structural adjustments, changes in school safety procedures, and revisions to the school board's standards for student conduct. So it involves, so the School Safety Audit Committee, under the current language of this citizen committee, it pretty much focused in on assessing schools' violence and discipline problems. This new language will extend a little further than that. It will not only focus in on discipline problems, but it will just focus in on safety concerns in general to identify and develop solutions. So it's not just a matter of pinpointing a problem, but also coming up with some recommendations that can be presented to the school board for addressing them. And this is a committee that Dr. Suzanne Rice and her office and her department, they work with. Any questions about this Citizen Advisory Committee?
Do you think, since the committee has already started for this year, that they will be ready in their report to do this? Or some of it seems similar to what they have been doing already? It's just bumped up a bit.
Yeah. Do
you think they've already started working on these? When I met with them, it seemed that what they were doing would seem to be consistent with what the new definition says. I don't know at this level, though. Practices to combat such problems. So I would think that they are moving in this direction.
And I do think that's true. In my conversation with Dr. Rice, it sounds to me as though this is what they have been doing. So I think that this would be in line with how they have been operating as a committee.
Okay.
And I'm trying to, I have a mental block right now. I'm trying to think of the person that is actually the chair of this committee. Ms. Davenport.
I know Mr. Lefebvre. Mr. Lefebvre is the person who's working with this committee.
That's correct. That's right.
And their report is due June 1 of each year.
Right. Right. That's right. So you're correct. He is the one that's working on this, and he's also involved in putting together the various reports, some of which have to go to Department of Ed. And so there are standard forms
the state
fill out.
Yes.
All right, so these are all of the proposed changes to your policies. Would you like for them to go on for first reading at the school board meeting on, I believe it's April the 15th?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
I think so.
So we're deleting 2, correct? And the rest of them would go on the agenda as first reading.
Right, and in fact, even the deletions will go
Would have to be
on,
approved.
Okay.
right, will have to be approved. So it will be listed as one of the policies, but it will be deleted as a deletion.
Okay.
All right, do we have anything else from either of you?
I don't have anything.
When will our next meeting be? Ms. Davenport, can you,
We believe they're supposed to be quarterly.
you're on mute.
We've been having a monthly, right?
Yes, I believe it's going to be in May. Let me look that up real quick for you.
Yeah, they're supposed to be quarterly.
Right.
We've been meeting every month.
So it would be when we have the next agenda meeting. Trying to open up my calendar here. Sorry about that. So I believe it's on May the 3rd.
May 3rd. And we'll do this again at 1 o'clock.
I hope that's, Mr. Waller, we also talked about 2 things. We've talked about just addition to consequences with norms and protocols. That may be a discussion we need to have, and I don't know, and it may not be, that may need to be a special meeting. That may be another discussion we need to have in another place. We may also, we need to do a board evaluation, but that's a whole nother thing as well. So that may be something we want to talk about, but we do need to talk about some additions to consequences with the norms and protocols. That's the discussion. And you could probably give us some advice as to whether this would be something in addition to the a policy discussion or session with the board or whatever we need to do. Maybe a workshop session or a work session or something. But it's a discussion that we probably need to have.
Maybe what we'll be able to do is,
It may not be.
yeah, I was going to say, maybe what we could do is that at one of your, maybe at the May policy review committee meeting, we could have some discussions about what things you may want to see in terms of a consequence for having violated norms or protocols, and having some discussion about that in May.
Okay.
And then from there, we can look at how we would incorporate that into your current policy.
All right. All right. Sounds like a plan. So May 3rd at 1 p.m.
I'm sorry, that's not gonna be May 3rd, it's gonna be on the 4th, I'm sorry.
May 4th at 1
Yes.
p.m.
May 4th,
Okay.
The next agenda meeting that we're having.
Okay.
May 4th, 1 p.m. Okay.
Okay.
And we'll start at tab 30. Is that where we'll be? Or 29, maybe?
We'll start
That's
at
29.
29.
29.
29. Okay.
And we normally try to do, I think we have, I don't have my listing in front of me, but at the beginning of the year, we actually listed how many we would do at each board meeting. So I think it's probably around 10 or 15, somewhere in that ballpark that we do each time.
I don't have-
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
All right, if there's nothing else, I thank you all for taking part. And we'll do this again on May the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Waller.
All right. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thanks,
Have a
Mr.
good
Walker.
evening.
Have a great afternoon.